Maybe people were recording by accident. Hi, I'm BL Hoffman, and I am the co-host of the Beyond Social Media Show, the podcast for marketing, advertising, and digital communicators. And I have the good fortune to be here today with Bob Hoffman. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with me. Let me introduce you. Bob's the author of 5 Amazon #1 selling books about advertising. He's also one of the most sought after international speakers on advertising and marketing. And it has been said about him, he's the best speaker we ever had, which is an awfully nice thing to have said. He's a creator of the very popular Contrarian blog and newsletter, which you must subscribe to immediately. And he's been named one of the world's most influential marketing and advertising blogs by Business Insider. He's also been one of the CEO of 2 independent agencies and the US operation of an international agency. In 2012, he was selected Ad Person of the Year by the San Francisco Advertising Club. And when we talk, you'll see why. Bob's commentary has appeared in the BBC World Service, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, MSNBC, the Financial Times, the Australian, New Zealand Public Broadcasting, Fox News, Sky News, Forbes, Canadian Public Broadcasting, and many others throughout the world. So welcome, Bob. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, BL. It's a pleasure to be here.
So many marketers and advertisers believe there's no better place to target ads than Facebook, and you very clearly don't agree. So I'd like to talk about what's wrong with advertising today and the role that Facebook plays. So I just want to read something you said that cracks me up. You said, the bullshit that Z-Bag has been peddling about Facebook's relentless tracking is that it's good because it allows for more relevant advertising, and consumers say they want more relevant advertising. For years, I've been saying that that is pure unadulterated horseshit. We now have unassailable proof that it is. Facebook would like us to believe that it's simply a bulletin board where people are free to post their beliefs and that this is healthy for society. But their own internal report about the 2016 election revealed the truth. It unambiguously described the way these platforms direct people into extremist groups of all stripes. So you describe advertising as akin to spyware and that it's very dangerous. So give us some understanding of that.
Sure. Online advertising has become very dangerous because it is, like you just said, as much spyware as it is advertising. The researchers tell us that about 5 people click out of 10,000 ads served. But all
Really?
10,000, yes, but all 10,000 of those ads served can collect information about us. So what is that online? Is it really about clicks when you have to run 10,000 ads to get 5 clicks, but you can collect information with all of those 10,000 ads? Something is very wrong there, and the online ad industry has been very cagey and very duplicitous about what we are told about what's going on in online advertising. And it has led to some very dangerous things. We know, for example, the fact that usually 64% of people who join extremist groups in Facebook join those groups because Facebook sends them to those extremist groups. And these extremist groups have become dangerous, as we saw on January 6th. And it's very unambiguous what's going on, but we in the advertising and marketing business have chosen mostly to ignore it.
Well, many marketers say that Facebook is the best way to target specifically. And, apparently it works. And that's why, they don't want to give it up. But you clearly don't agree with that.
I don't care if it's the most efficient way to target. When did the convenience of marketers become more important than the privacy rights of individuals and the integrity of democratic societies. I mean, that's what's happening with this stuff. It's undermining our freedoms. It's undermining our confidence in democratic institutions. We know what happened with Cambridge Analytica. That's not a mystery.
And Facebook knew what happened.
And Facebook, of course, they knew what
Yeah.
happened. So who cares if it's more efficient at targeting? For some companies, I'm sure it is, and for other, some companies find it useful, and other companies find it wasteful, just like all types of advertising. But that's not the issue. The issue is not whether personal target, one-to-one precision targeting is effective or not. That's not the issue. The issue is it dangerous or not? And it clearly and unambiguously is dangerous, and we need to stop it because we're going down a very dangerous road. We know what happens when governments know everything about us, when they follow us everywhere, when they have secret files on us, when they listen in on our conversations, when they read our mail. We know what happens. We know about the KGB and the Stasi and the Gestapo, but we don't know what happens when marketers do all those things, when marketers follow us everywhere, when marketers read what we're writing, when marketers listen in on our conversations, when marketers have secret files about us that we don't know. We don't know where that leads. This is unprecedented, but we're starting to know what's going on with it because we're starting to see the results of the algorithms that they are creating based on the information they're collecting about us, the tracking that they're doing on us. That data is being fed into algorithms, which goes into platforms like Facebook, for example, where your Facebook page is completely different from my Facebook page because the algorithm knows what I'm interested in and what you're interested in. And the algorithm wants to keep us on Facebook as long as it can. So what does it do? It feeds us juicier and juicier information, which they call more engaging information, but it is really more radical information. It takes us down rabbit holes that introduce us to people with more, whose point of view is like ours, but it's a more radical notion of ours. And it introduces us to those people, and it creates very dangerous groups. And the Facebook algorithm helps those groups grow, and those groups become radicalized and dangerous. And it's not ambiguous. We saw what happened on January 6th. And are we going to just continue doing this, or are we going to put some barriers to the kind of dangerous activity that online advertisers and marketers are exposing us to?
I interviewed J.J. Kosman, who's a data scientist, and I said, are they able to stop this? And he said, of course, it just doesn't match their business model. All of the social networks could stop this tracking right now, and they don't. So what are the alternatives? How are we going to get this to change? Is there a way that we can do that?
There are two possible ways to do it. One is through consumer pressure, and the other is through legislation. The industry itself will never change unless it's forced to. They are too irresponsible to change. They know what's going on, and they're too rich, yeah. And they're not going to change on their own volition. So either consumers have to pressure them to change, which is starting to happen, or legislators have to wake up and create legislation that gives consumers a fair deal compared to what the technology companies are getting. Right now, there's a tremendous imbalance of power between the technology companies and the average consumer. And it's an asymmetry that has become very dangerous.
So one thing that happened recently was that Apple changed its privacy algorithm according to them, but equally they're developing their own tracking system for advertising. So, What do you think about that? I thought that was pretty freaking sneaky.
Now, Apple's a little better than most. Actually, Apple's, you know, Apple is certainly not free of sneakiness, as you say. They also have their little things that they're doing that are not very pleasant, but they're a lot better than the Facebooks and the Googles are. And Apple could actually, if they wanted to, they might be able to revolutionize what's happening in online advertising by setting a really strong example of how online commerce and online activity can be brought back to a normal relationship there. I don't know if you know Shoshana Zuboff. I don't know if you've heard of her. She wrote a book called something about the surveillance economy. She's a brilliant, like a Harvard, really smart person. And she had an article in the New York Times last week about her feeling that Apple could really make some big, now that they've taken a first step toward putting some pressure to stop third-party tracking in their mobile operating system, they can really go ahead and make a difference if they choose to. Now, they have made privacy part of their marketing program. And it's an important part of what they're saying to the public about privacy. And, if they're serious about it, they can make some big changes, I think. Well, we'll see if they're really serious about it. But a good first step, I think Google is going to do something good next year in ending third-party tracking on their Chrome browser. These are all good steps. They're not enough. That we've got a long way to go. There's still way too much tracking going on. The governments are still not enforcing their regulations. Over in Europe, we had the EU passed the GDPR, which is supposed to protect individuals, but they have not done very much enforcement at all, and it's pretty much a joke. Here in California, where I am, we have the CCPA, which is essentially the same as the GDPR. And once again, it has not really been enforced. There's way too much playing around going on. And so governments have to wake up a little bit, I think, in order. But, the legislators, they kind of believe that they want this one-to-one personalized advertising. They want to be able to reach their constituents one-to-one. So they have a vested interest to some extent in continuing
it seems
what's
like
going on.
everyone has a vested interest in not having change. But one of the things that you write about a lot is programmatic. And you have written that money's being stolen from marketers. It's a whole fiasco. And that advertising is not any better for programmatic. So tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
Well, an organization in the UK called ISBA, along with Price Waterhouse, Price Waterhouse, I don't know. They did a study, a 2-year study of 12 of the largest, most sophisticated online advertising brands like Disney and Nestle and really big, sophisticated. And they found that 50% of their money disappeared into the ad tech world. In other words, only 50 cents of every dollar they spent actually went to advertising. The rest of it was vacuumed up by ad tech vendors. And that of the 50% that was vacuumed up by ad tech vendors, 30% of that completely disappeared and was untraceable, and no one knows where it went. So if you take a look at online advertising as about a $300 billion business worldwide, 15% of that is what, $45 billion disappearing into nobody knows where.
How is that possible?
And that is for the most sophisticated advertisers. Can you imagine how much money is disappearing from the average advertiser. Only of all the studies they did, 88% of the time, the money that was spent was not traceable from beginning to end.
That's
In other words,
mind-blowing.
somewhere along the line, in 88% of cases, some money has been disappearing.
Where do you
And,
suspect it goes?
well, there are a number of suspects. A lot of it goes to fraud. Nobody knows how big fraud is. Everyone has a different estimate. But the people I trust most think that at least 20% of online programmatic advertising goes to fraud. And the longer the long tail is, the more the fraud exists. And here's how programmatic advertising adds to fraud. One of the value propositions of programmatic advertising is that I can find you your target customer at a cheaper place than if you bought directly. So for example, let's say I want to reach someone like B.L. Hoffman. Am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. So she reads the New York Times, and I could buy ads on the New York Times and reach BL because we know she reads the New York Times. But why should I do that? Let's do this. Let's follow her around the web, and we'll find her at sewingneedles.com, and instead of paying $1 to reach her on the New York Times website, I can pay a nickel and reach her on sewingneedles.com website, and with the same ad to the same person. That's the value proposition of programmatic advertising. The problem is sewingneedles.com doesn't exist. It's a bot. It's software that looks like a website, but doesn't exist. And also, B.L. Hoffman doesn't exist. She is a bot who you are selling advertising to. So there's fraud.
No, I'm not a bot.
You're the real BL.
Yeah.
But the bot BL is also on the web.
Really?
And these the fraudsters are always 3 steps ahead of the good guys. The bad guys are always 3 steps ahead, and they are becoming more and more sophisticated, and they can create more and more software that looks like a website or looks like a person, and they can get advertising money through that. They put up some software. It looks like it's a website. Coca-Cola sends ads to that website, except the website doesn't exist, and the crooks get the money. And who are the crooks? Well, probably organized crime, probably state-sponsored criminals, probably some terrorist organizations, and probably just some teenagers in their mother's basement collecting money. So it's very murky. Nobody, there's no international registry of online fraudsters where you have to go sign up to become to get credentials to be a fraudster. And as you know, the whole point of fraud is to avoid detection. The good fraudsters are never found. It's only the bad ones who we find out about. And there's plenty, we know about plenty of bad ones. So it's it's very disconcerting. I've been in the advertising world for so long, and to see it become so corrupt, and it's disheartening to me.
It's very. So what about influencers? We're told that they're more believable because they're like us and they're not big corporations. What do you think about them for advertisers?
I am a big unfan of influencers. I think it's very bad for kids. You know, it's particularly young people who get sucked in by these influences. You know, nobody with any brains listens to these people, but there are a lot of young people without brains, and they are influenced by idiots and morons, and it's not good for them to particularly, and I'm going to get shit for this, I know it, but it's particularly bad for girls. For some reason, girls, I don't know, they're attracted to these creepy women who are not really good role models, who are all about what they look like rather than who they really are. They're not particularly intelligent, most of them. They're just, you know, famous for being famous.
You're definitely going to get shit for that.
Yeah, I know. But I think there are a lot of feminist women who agree with me, who think that this is dangerous for young girls to be following these creeps around. And then they're not all creeps. You know, some of the influences are okay, but
Well,
most of them are creepy. And but this is nothing new. We've had testimonials in advertising since advertising began. This is not new. What's new now, it has a new name. It's been rebranded. Gee, are you hearing that noise that's going on
yeah, don't
outside?
worry about it.
Okay. Um, it's been rebranded as influencers. We used to call them, you know, endorsers or testimonials.
Right.
And there's just more of them. And online, they are more accessible than they used to be to the public.
You know, equally so, though, I interviewed Miranda Head, who's a TikTok influencer with
Mm,
7 million followers for her cooking show.
yeah,
And she gets sponsors of, you know, who sell cookware and things like that. And she's a, you know, she's a lovely young woman. And, you know, you can't paint them all with a broad brush and say they're
no,
all trash, but an awful lot are. And, you know, there's an awful lot of fraud there too. So let's change the topic a little bit. Let's talk about ageism and what it's doing to advertising and to business in general. And that
yeah,
is related to influencers, isn't it?
yeah. Ageism has been a problem in the advertising industry for a long time, but it's particularly bad now. Um, the there's no sense to it. Um, People over 50 have 70% of the wealth in the US. They buy over half of all, they do over half of all consumer spending. If people over 50 in the US were their own country, they would be the third largest economy in the world, bigger than the total economies of Germany and Japan and India. That's how much economic influence they have. And yet, 5 to 10% of marketing activity is aimed at people over 50. It's ridiculous. It makes absolutely no sense, but it has become a ritual in the advertising industry and in the marketing industry to target young people. And there's no data to support it. There's no logic to support it, but there is what's the word? There's rituals and legends that support it, and that's why it's being done. You know, people in the advertising industry are all young. You walk into any advertising agency, and the first thing that hits you is everyone's young. And who do young people want? They don't want to talk to old farts like me. They want to talk to young people like themselves. And so they create advertising for young people like themselves. They create strategies, so-called strategies, that aren't really strategies at all. They're really just narcissism disguised as strategy that convinces their clients to target people like them. And what it is it's marketing by selfie stick. That's what it is. And marketers somehow have not caught on yet to this. And marketers themselves are to blame too, because no, who everyone's interested in the excitement of youth. Nobody cares about the boredom of middle age or the problems of old age. Nobody, you can't become a famous advertising or marketing person talking to old farts. You win awards by doing ads that are young and hip. That's how you win awards. And that's what the marketing and advertising industry like to do. It's very silly, and I've been writing about this for a long time too.
Well, it's a scourge, really. And if you are looking for work and you look at the ads for employment, the most you're ever going to see is 10 years experience, which means, don't be over 30.
Yeah, you cannot get a job in an ad agency if you're over 35 these days. It's impossible. It's ridiculous. And it's a shame because advertising has become really, really terrible. I mean, I don't think I'm the only one who's noticed this, but advertising has gotten really bad. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of research that is indicating that people have lost all kinds of trust in advertising, that people hate advertising. And one of the reasons is it's being done by a lot of people who are amateurs, who really don't know what they're doing, who haven't been around, who don't know how to talk to people. When you're 26 years old, it's very hard to imagine yourself as being 55 and what does a 55 think and what does a 55-year-old want. If you're 55, you kind of know what 26-year-olds are like. You were one once, so you have a kind of an idea. But when you're 26, you don't know what a 55-year-old is like. And so we have a whole lost generation of very talented creative people and advertising people who have been let go because they're bad casting. They're not young and hip.
Well, some of them are hip, they're just not young.
Yes, that's true. That's
you
true.
know
So yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. But so you recently spoke to members of parliament about online privacy for kids. How did that go? What was that reaction?
I was asked by members of parliament to talk about the issue of online tracking. They are considering legislation to protect kids from data vampires who are following them all over and collecting information about them. There are some startling statistics about this. I'm going to get this wrong, but it's something like this. By the time a kid is 15, there were already like 1 million data points floating around about that kid, what they go to online, what they've clicked on, and so in the UK, they're trying to come up with legislation to protect kids from the data vampires. And I was asked to do a little talk about the dangers of tracking and what's happening in tracking. And that happened last week. And it was a Zoom call. I wasn't in line, so I don't. You really don't know how it's going unless you see people's faces. But the reaction that I got from the MPs who I could see on the Zoom call, I think was very positive. And the questions that I got afterward also indicated to me that they were very aware of the issue and they were interested in actually doing something about it. And so I'm hoping that what I had to say was useful to them and will lead to some relief from the constant and relentless surveillance that we're under by the marketing and advertising industry.
I would hope that would happen here as well, but I don't hold out a lot of hope for it happening here, to be honest with you. I mean, there's just too much money involved and too many people who are enjoying things the way they are because they're making money off of them.
Too many people making too much money. Nobody wants to kill the golden goose. I wish I could be hopeful that our legislative bodies were a little more responsible about this, but time will tell if they are or not.
Well, we can only hope. So tell me, what's your next book going to be about?
My next book, in 2017, I wrote a book called Bad Men: How Advertising Went from a Minor Annoyance to a Major Menace. And I am working on Bad Men Part 2, because in 2017, when I wrote the book, privacy was not really a big issue. Very few people were paying attention to it. But in the intervening 4 or 5 years, it has become a very important issue, and a lot has happened. And I want to update that book, and that's what I'm working on right now.
So I have to ask you about all the musical instruments
Yeah.
behind you. Okay, so you told me before we started that you play them all, and,
Yeah.
and that you are
Very,
you in a
very
band?
poorly. Yeah, no, I am not. I was in a band in high school. Really, the worst band you ever heard in your life. But I haven't been in a band since. I'm not a good player. I'm strictly an amateur player, but I enjoy it. It's a hobby, so that's what all the instruments are for. They're hobbyist things. They're not professional.
Well, that's a pretty strong hobby. I'm counting more than a dozen instruments around
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
So, Bob, I want to thank you so much for your wisdom, and I will include all the ways to get in touch with you in the show notes and
Great.
on the YouTube video. And everybody, if you're not already subscribed to Bob's website, you really must get his newsletter, because every week it's got stuff that you're not going to really see anywhere else. You know, your point of view is so extraordinarily unique and important, you know, super important. So I thank you for taking the time with us today. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to stop right now.
Thanks.